I would ask a question. Would that be addressed with this new language?
And I just hit record on the meeting, so I'm so sorry that I didn't do it earlier. So I think what we had potentially discussed was having a reporting requirement to the Department of Community Health to attest that the people working for them are meeting those requirements.
I guess my question is, this is Kate from DNR. I know we're, I guess, trying to do it. We're trying to do it, I guess, without changing the code and putting something new at the composite medical board or whatnot. But I feel like maybe we're just shifting the burden to DCH instead. Because it just kind of seems like we're trying to do the same thing, but doing it through a different venue, essentially, to me. So I don't know if DCH might have, I guess, an issue with taking on all of these new responsibilities in this situation.
We can definitely reach out to them. And again, I wasn't intending to vote on this today. It was more of a discussion point. But I think the difference would be, instead of like a registry, it would be them attesting to the requirement. And again, the thought process behind it was, A, they could make a rule change to, not tomorrow, there's an administrative process, but sooner than legislation could get enacted. But then again, we just have to look at it from a new type of registration for licensing board, which we haven't looked at yet this council this year for all the bills that we've been meeting. That's why this one's been a little bit more in depth of a review. This is a new licensure board. Are there other ways rather than state-led, a new licensure board to accomplish these goals? If that answers your question.
I believe
it does answer my question. I guess I just wanted to make sure that, you know, before we recommend this, that, we get some type of buy-in from DCH, yes, that they're like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, we absolutely will do that. Again, we were not going to vote on this today. I was just asking if we wanted to get something drafted, because I need to ask DCH for more than just a hypothetical sort of a question. So I've seen Don's hands up, but Chris looks like he's been wanting to talk. So if you want to talk, Christopher Turner. You're still muted.
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay, Don.
Thank you. My question is, if we consider going the route of the rule change through the Department of Community Health, once the rule is changed, those people who are currently not meeting that requirement, whatever the requirement is set to be, they are automatically non-compliant and would have a problem, you know. So the licensure bill takes into account those individuals, and through the grandfathering effort and the continuing education would help to get them up to speed. Would the rule change route allow that same option?
I'm not a lawyer, but I imagine that the rule change could be drafted in a way that it would, allow for whatever we're trying to change it for. Again, I don't have a rule written currently. Anybody else want to speak on this or to this right now? Do any of our legislators want to speak about this? We've heard from Senator Watson and Representative Cooper. Representative Earhart, do you want to comment on this one? Number by number, so I don't have the sliding. Okay, let me give you. Okay, sure. So to kind of move forward on this, Anybody else from the public want to speak on this current thing? See faces that look like they want to say something. This is your opportunity. Okay. Okay, so how we'll move forward with this, again, we were not going to vote on any of these today, is we will reach out to Department of Community Health and just see what a potential rule change possibility would happen. So, and if how it would take into account those currently, how they'd handle a potential grandfathering situation, and how we could set up a rule or a reporting mechanism of some kind, attestation. The employers may not be the people who they work for. Anybody else?
So Anna, this is Kelly. I mean, obviously this would adjust the fiscal note on this, correct? We'd have a different option.
Yep.
So I foresee, you know, a database and being able to track that and people entering into the database, similar to SOS.
We'll reach out to see from DCH and get their
Okay.
kind of
Thank you.
intent on this. Okay. And then we'll move on to the next bill. If anybody needs to comment on this, they don't want to do it this way, you can reach out to me and let me know. Okay, so moving on to 430. So we hot off the press this morning, we got a fiscal note request for House Bill 430. And because of that, we will not vote on that bill until I get the full fiscal note back. So Gabe, check your email. We will, so at the next meeting, I would expect that we could vote on the cost effect of this. I think this would be from the lens of both APRN switch, but then also it's probably kind of, it would encompass the reporting portion of it as well. So that got that request this morning. So that will be kind of an update on that. But beyond that, I know Bethany wanted to speak on the new LC draft. So go ahead with that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having that sent over so that we could review it with the new LC number. And I will try to keep my comments brief. I know everyone is busy and you have a lot to talk about. So I think from reading this bill, my biggest question is what is actually improved by changing from where we are to where we're going? How will this actually have a meaningful impact on patient safety and our ability to oversee care to patients, and just making sure that we're taking into consideration how many different areas of the code that are currently touched by the way the licensure provisions are set up, as we look forward to different things like compacts that are coming in that may be affected by the way that we license anyone in this state. And the APRN licensure compact is quite different than any of the other compacts that we have in the state, and has a tremendous effect on scope of practice. So we always want to keep in mind how all of these things are intertwined in discussions that we have later on. The other question I have, and I'm hopeful that maybe somebody can explain to me, the legislation mentions in a couple of different places that that to be an APRN, they must function in a population focus. I'm not 100% sure if that's defined somewhere or if that's just a term of art that we've used in other places in the code. And I just want to make sure that we all understand what that actually means and whether that would affect any of our APRNs that are currently practicing, and whether or not, is that something that's defined by the nursing board, or is that something that's defined elsewhere in the code, so that we can look through kind of our current workforce and make sure that we're not damaging that aspect of things. The third and kind of final thing that I would mention is that under our current process, right, so you're getting an authorization to practice, how will moving to a licensure, you know, it's a, I guess, a good opportunity for us to have a discussion about how oversight of APRNs should be done in the state. And we feel that there should be some physician involvement in APRN oversight, as the state has made it a policy to have APRNs in a protocol agreement, which is a supervisory agreement with physicians. And so moving to a licensure sort of changes the conversation, and that, you know, we have to wonder, how could we involve physicians more in that conversation, or ensure that someone who is licensed as an APRN is getting the proper kind of oversight for the type of work that they're doing. So there is a difference, obviously, between the practice of an RN or anyone else overseen by the nursing board and the work that APRNs are handed through the protocol agreements. So you know, that is a different level of patient care. And you know, how do we make sure that that practice is overseen by the proper professionals, and that most of that practice is overseen by APRNs or above? And you know, currently, so we have sort of two groups. So we have APRNs and PAs are under the medical board, which means through their protocol agreement, that entirety of that chain is overseen by the same board. And we would just want to make sure that we're getting that same sort of continuity of ensuring all of the proper oversight according to Georgia law. And it would, you know, I think be helpful to at least consider how the medical board should be involved in those discussions.
I would let Dr. Eichelberger or Dr. Clement speak to some of your points in the second question. I know that they were going to show us or speak to how they currently walk through the registration or authorization process. So maybe that'll address the question, Bethany, but we thank you for your comments for sure. So I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Eichelberger and Dr. Clement. So go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, and thank you very much for allowing us to come back and talk with you all today. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, for just a minute. I think, can everybody see?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I think I've met everybody before. I am Lisa Eichelberger, and I'm back today just to clarify some of the issues that were raised at our presentation back in June. And just wanted to say happy 4th of July belatedly to everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful time. You might recall that I think at our last GORC meeting that we had an older version of the bill, and I'm glad that we got that all straightened out. And I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory that we do have there's three separate parts to this composite bill of 430. The first is that Bethany mentioned, the APR licensure is changing the current authorization to practice for APRNs to a license to practice. And then the second is to the disability parking permits. That is really just changing code to allow the APRNs and PAs to be on the approved list of practitioners, to eliminate the confusion. And then the third part is to require the current workforce survey as a part of the licensure process that now is voluntary. So I just wanted to refresh everybody that there is no changes to the requirement for licensure, and to alleviate some of the concerns that Ms. Scherer brought up. There's absolutely no changes to any of the protocols, no changes to any requirements for licensure or to the way that the APRNs will practice in the future under a licensure. This is not a new process, and there's absolutely no changes in any of the requirements for education, certification, or licensure. There will be some upfront costs. These were mentioned earlier at our last meeting. There will be some upfront cost. However, several years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, there was an assessment done about moving to an APRN license. And at that time, there were some upfront costs that were determined. However, the ongoing costs were determined to be negligible because there are now currently 5 analysts working in the Georgia Board of Nursing and 1 supervisor of licensure, and they are already assessing the proof of APRN education, the proof of certification, proof of Georgia licensure. So the same process that is already in place for the authorization to practice is and would continue under House Bill 430. The only thing that this bill would do would be replacing that authorization to practice with a license number for each of the 4 APRN roles. And I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Dr. Desiree Clement, who's a professor at Emory University, who actually functions in 2 roles here in the state of Georgia. And she's going to explain to you how her current authorization to practice works here in Georgia. Dr. Clement?
Thank you, Dr. Eichelberger, Dr. Desiree Clement, and I'm also the co-director of the Georgia Coalition of APRNs, and that is who I'm representing today on behalf of APRNs and not Emory University, where I'm employed. Dr. Eichelberger, would you mind changing it to my exemplar slide so that I can show the members here?
It's on there, Dr. Melissa.
Okay, thank you. I'll forward it. So I wanted to show my own example. I'm a rare example of that. I'm not only just a nurse in Georgia, I'm also a certified nurse midwife. And then later on, I ended up going back to school and receiving my national certification for postgraduate to become also a family nurse practitioner. So with this, as you can see, when you pull up the website, this is what it would look like, Georgia Online Licensing. Now, as we know, right now, currently in Georgia, we only receive an authorization to practice. We're one of only 10 states left that does not have a separate APRN licensure. What happens is when I go to recertify or renew, so I recertify nationally, I have to meet my national criteria, which I did in order to just become an APRN and then be given authorization to practice in each role. But as I added on each role, again, which is a little bit different than most people only have 1 role, but you can occasionally add on a 2nd role as an APRN. I had to basically meet the requirements of every role that I've done, not only at the national level, go back to school, receive separate training and national certification to be able to pass and then use that title, but then also at the state level, whether it's an authorization or a license, depending on the state and the requirement, I have to also meet their standards for each role. When I'm practicing in each role, then I also have to fall under that scope with that rule. And therefore, when I'm a CNM, then I'm working usually with an OBGYN or possibly family practice, depending on if they do prenatal care. When I'm an FNP, then typically I'm only working with family practice or internal medicine physicians. That's already part of the statutes that you must align with what the scope is as an APRN when you're putting in your nurse protocol agreements. Therefore, when I am practicing under which role I'm on, when I go to renew, as you can see there, all 3 fall under 1 single number. Actually, for the Department of Secretary of State and the Georgia Board of Nursing, having a separate license number for each role separate from my RN license, not only would offer better data tracking for where each role is practicing, but also for safety tracking, so that if there was an issue at the APRN level dealing with my scope or something going on, then I could still retain my RN license, but then my APRN license would separately be under investigation if need be. So with that, not only does it provide better safety tracking, better data tracking for the State Board of Nursing, also for the Composite Medical Board, but also it ensures that we're able to have that if we wanted to retire one of the roles, like one of my APRN roles, say I'm done being a CNM, I could retire that. I'm only practicing as a family nurse practitioner, keep my NP one, or retire both and just only work under my RN, which I would then have to adhere to that scope of which license I'm working under. Any questions here? Because when we're looking also at population foci, an APRN has to choose a population that she or he is going to be certified in, they're trained in to care for that population. So as a midwife, generally, I'm sure y'all are aware, as a certified nurse midwife, I'm doing OBGYN care, prenatal, delivering babies. Whereas when I'm working under my F&P license, authorization, then I'm not doing that. I could, I'm mainly doing primary care, and I keep the two separated. And with population foci, also nurse practitioners, unlike certified nurse anesthetists that work specifically in anesthesia only, or midwives who generally only work in OB-GYN care or primary care of the woman, as a nurse practitioner, there's several specialties that you can care for that population. And as that, a neonatal nurse practitioner can only work in the neonatal population, or family, which is a little broader, is similar to a general practitioner. Whereas women's health NP, if you're only certified and recognized as that in the state, they're only working with women. So that's where we're talking about when we discuss the population foci. And that's what the statutes are interpreting to mean, that you must work under what you've been trained and certified to do. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Dr. Clement.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So why do we need an APRN license, Dr. Clement? I think went over that. Having that separate number really does help us for better tracking. And as myself as the chair of the workforce data collection, as Dr. Clement said, APRNs work in different roles in different locations. And as we have tried to track the nurses and where they're working, we see, as Dr. Clement said, we have APRNs who work as a nurse practitioner in Cobb County, but they may work on one day of the week, but then they may also work as a registered nurse in Fulton County and another day of the week. And so having those separate numbers, it would really help us to track who's working where in what type of role. And as Dr. Clement said, it would enable us to allow them to retire or relinquish. Certainly, as very often as physicians do, they may not want to work as a nurse midwife or an OBGYN or a CRNA. At different points in times, and then also to facilitate investigations into practice issues for revocation and restriction of an APRN license, should that happen. And I was thinking about how to try to make this better understood, and I came up with the example of a general residential contractor's license. Many of them hold, they may have a general residential contractor's license, such as equivalent to the RN, but then they also may hold other specialty license within that. And so we would never think of restricting them and say that they couldn't also hold a license or wouldn't be able to hold a license as a plumber, electrician, or an HVAC license. It's all in terms of construction and as or a care of a patient, but they have specializations within that, the whole home building industry. And so they should be able to have a separate license so that they have credentialing and education in those specialty areas. And for me, that is a similar type of thing of what we're talking about, so that we can track them, know how many we have, where they're working, and if they're able to practice in those specialty areas.
So just sorry to jump in there. Just
Sure.
for clarification. So RN, you have license number, whatever it is.
Yes.
And you would have CNM, license number, whatever it is, for all of the things except for APRN right now. That's right? Yes.
No, each certified nurse midwife would have their own number. The
Yeah.
CRNAs would have their own number.
Right.
And they and also would have a registered nurse license. So
Right.
they would have two.
So that's, but the only thing that's not a new number is the authorization for APRN. Right?
That has no number, right? The authorization to practice currently has no number associated with it.
As you can see, Anna, in my example here and for everyone else to see, so I have one number I work under regardless of role, but I get issued 3 separate authorization cards that look like licensure cards. And even in the national database, it falls under 3 licensures for Georgia.
I only see the GORC presentation main slide. I don't know if that's everybody.
That's everybody.
Oh,
Okay.
wait. Okay, you're not seeing my presentation?
We
I
see your
just-
I
I
just
see it.
figured this out. This is a new
Slide.
thing. Teams apparently. Go up to the very top and you'll see page numbers 1 of 8. Do you see that at the top of yours
Names has changed.
where it says 2 presenter and 1?
My apologies. So when I was speaking to that, I thought it was in front of y'all as I could see
Right.
it.
No, this is Teams changes almost weekly, so we're constantly learning. But I think you're on slide 4 of 8. Is that correct?
Right, that is correct.
Okay, so what are y'all seeing now?
The same thing. Sorry.
You have to advance it yourself. That's what I've been doing.
Okay.
With the bar down the corner and advance
Now
it yourself. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So
All right, Gabe, take back.
I'm gonna let Gabe ask his question. This is
Okay.
my question. Okay, so go
I
ahead.
think it dovetails with
Yeah.
Chairwoman Miller's question. And because this is going to affect the fiscal note. For each APRN designation, is there a separate license or is there an APRN license? And then you can have, midwife, nurse practitioner, all the other things.
No, I would, so you would have a separate APRN license to match that role. It is actually rare to have 2 of 4 of the roles. Most people, if they go back to school typically or extra training as a nurse practitioner, they may be a family nurse practitioner that then goes and gets a psych mental health nursing NP role. And so they're able to add that on because you're not changing the role. So I would say the APRN licensure goes with the role. So
Okay,
I'm,
is
go
it a
ahead.
separate number for each
yes.
role?
Yes, for tracking.
Just so y'all know, that's going to drastically increase the cost. So that is the reality of it. And I know it's in the presentation, was it 6 different designations? I just can't recall off the top of my head.
No, 4.
No, there's 4, and as a nurse that's what I was trying to say. I'm a little bit different. I'm a CNM and a nurse practitioner. There's very few of us in the country.
Oh, I get that part. Are there
Okay.
4 APRN
Right.
roles, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Correct.
Because I don't think it matters how many of y'all do those things. If they have to 4 exist in the system, it's going to cost the same as
If one person does it.
Yeah.
All right.
So, okay.
That clarifies something for me for that, so that helps a good amount. Thank you.
Okay.
And the problem you have there is, and I don't know if you're going to cut to me for comment after this discussion's over, or I should do it now. Your call.
Go ahead.
It's fine if you want to make the comments now, Gabe.
Well, you're right in the fact that individual analysts are going to still do these same things, but now that these are multiple licenses with multiple license types, they have to touch multiple licenses, which actually may increase the workload more than you think off the top of your head, because right now everything's done inside a single touch, inside a single record, for lack of a better word. For renewals, I have to renew the RN and then the APRN. Again, it's not a lot, but the secondary part of this in terms of the long-term costs, when you looked at the thing before, it didn't include the workforce items. And what's going to happen with the way our system is currently configured, which we're trying to work on changing potentially in the next year or two, if we have to spend time chasing them down for deficiencies based on the fact they haven't filled out the workforce stuff, that will require ongoing work for the next 2 years or so as these things continue to begin. And if it's workforce stuff continually, it will be attached to the renewals as well, is my assumption, correct?
Yes, the workforce survey will be,
Yeah.
yes, it will be attached.
And over time, people will get trained and it'll get better, but there is going to be a cost of time and effort and money attached to doing that as well over time. Again, if the legislature sees fit to give us the money for this, we're fine. but the fronting cost now has just quadrupled from the numbers we originally had by going from 1 license to 4 licenses. Because it is what it is coming out of the gate with the vendor.
But Gabe, but for most people, like I was explaining, it would really just be it'd just be 1 extra license for them.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's the building out of it is the same if 1 person does it or 1 million people do it. It's the same build out for the workflow inside the IT system. I hope that makes sense on that front. Like I said, if 1 person does it, it's a single build out. If 500 people do it, it's a single build out. So having 4 of them is 4 times as expensive as having 1 license, if that makes sense. Because it's just that is the cost for development, and it's terrible and it sucks, but it is what it is.
Right. I understand exactly what you're saying. We'd have to have 4 build outs, 1 for the CRNA, 1 for the nurse practitioner. Yeah. 1 for each role. Got it.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. And then the workforce stuff and adding it to the renewal, that's something we haven't usually added something additional to the renewal process outside of you're paying your fee and your CEs are done. This would be a new thing to add to that. So now I have to investigate the cost on that as well. So again, not earth shattering, but it's there and it's been built out as optional before, but not mandatory. So that makes this a little bit different.
Right.
Gabe, when you do the cost structure of it, can you do the cost of the license and then the cost of the extra stuff?
I'll separate it out and then I'll put in our
just so we can see the line items of it, and then we'll have a total. But just
probably do on everything is there's going to be a 10%. Oh crap, we didn't think of that in these things because there always seems to be that. But yeah, we'll get those numbers worked out relatively now that we have the fresh off the hot presses, and I did read it earlier and I did see it. So we will get those turned around as quickly as we can and as thoroughly as we can. Thank you all.
okay.
Okay.
So y'all can keep going.
Yeah, the next one is the workforce data collection that Gabe was just talking about. And I'm now totally confused about what you can see and what you can't see. But
I see it. I see it now. I see
you can see it.
Workforce data collection. So we're good.
All right, good deal. I just wanted to clarify, after the meeting was over last time, I did send Anna a copy of the data itself to make sure that everybody found out and knew exactly what kind of information we were collecting. There's no identifying data that would be shared with anyone. Obviously, when the licensee renews and they submit it to the Board of Nursing, their name and address is on it. But that in no way is shared ever. It's always given in aggregated form that is county specific or zip code aggregated. So no individual person has ever been able to be identified with it, just like it's done for the physicians, PAs, and so forth with all the others. No financial data questions are asked at all about how much money do you make and that sort of thing. None of that is done. And this is a nationally normed survey that's used with other 35 other states. And this is not precedent-setting law. It's already being required for dentists and dental hygienists to obtain their law. And we just found out Monday when we had our meeting that the data from the 2020 nursing workforce surveys are in, and our response rate is even down over what it was for 2019, which was very low, and it's down 20% for 2019. So it's not good. I did want to let you know that since we met on the 16th and the figures that I reported to you, we had at that time 164,000 nurses in the state. That has increased as of yesterday. We now have 170,000 total nurses and almost 18,000 APRNs practicing in Georgia, which is a good thing. And if we just take the revenue that's generated, according to the Secretary of State's office, the licensing fees collected by the nurses, we are the largest producer of income from the licensing boards. If you just take, it costs more now to renew a license, to get a license initially, but if we just take the renewal, that's $65 without the APRNs. And we already mentioned last time, it's $75 for the almost 18,000 APRNs. So if you look at the amount of revenue that is generated, yes, there will be some costs for implementing this upfront cost that we've mentioned, but it's almost $10 million collected every 2 years from licensing fees from the nurses, just the basic nurses. And then another $1.3 million collected from the advanced practice nurses for over $11 million every 2 years collected into the general fund, of course. And so I think in conclusion, while there is some upfront cost, the ability to us to being able to know the supply and demand of data that we have about our nurses in the state is just immeasurable. And so the House Bill 430 is critical for us being able to measure, track, monitor, adequately investigate and discipline those APRNs as necessary. And I really appreciate it. And we will, there's several of us on the phone as well. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have that we didn't answer during this presentation. So thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you. Kelly, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't see it and you might have spoken to it. It didn't register with me, but out of the 170,000 nurses, how many actually respond to this survey versus looking at how many did not? I'm curious.
Well, this year we renew half each year. And so that would have been, 80 something thousand. And this year we got 40,000. So right around 50% are responding.
Okay. And I would imagine
now
for 2020, that's going to be a lot less only because y'all are all exhausted from our public health emergency.
It was the year before it was 50,000. So it was 10,000 respond less than we did the year before. Now that is, they responded to some questions, not all the questions. So, we have some questions that they only responded to, 5% out of them responded. So, there's some data fields that we have only 5% respond to. It's quite interesting.
And I don't know, Gabe, maybe you, because of other surveys that you guys send out, I don't know what the average return for any survey is attached to a license, if there are any. 50% actually sounds pretty good compared to, I don't even know how many, well, Anna, you do census stuff. How many people actually respond to census?
I was going to say 50% sounds great to me.
Well, 50,000 people responded, but it was not a 50% return rate because as I said, we had some data fields that only had like 4% were full. The 21, when we got back, only 8% responded to.
Yeah, and I just think we probably need to look at what average response rates are, because what I would hate to happen is there is a registered nurse who, and I don't know anything about this, but doesn't respond because they don't have time or interest, and then they don't get a renewed license. Like, we need so many nurses. Is that important enough to attach to their licensure? And that's the only, because I don't think anyone gets 100% or even close to 50% on surveys. That's just
And
something-
never, I don't think I've ever been involved with a survey that had just every person answer every question. So my question was going to be, so the whole thing is required now. Is all of the fields required before you hit next? Or I don't know if that has a cost estimate involved with it, Gabe, if you lock some fields or
And
not.
that's my blatant overrunning fears is that we were going to have people chasing down people to fill out one question they missed. So we have to sort of make common sense understanding under a rule to decide what do we consider substantively complete. And that changed what we have to do.
I did speak to the president of Systems Automation, Charles Rubin, today about that, and he said that it is possible for them to make it a non-executable form, so that you know, we've all taken those surveys that or filled out those forms that say, nope, you can't go any further. You didn't fill out that question. And so he said, yes, that they do that all the time with forms and with licensing
Let me be
renewals.
SA can say that all day long. It all has a cost attached to it, and the current system we have right now allows for us essentially, it is binary. It is either you turn it on that they have to fill out everything all the time, or you turn it off, they get to be willy-nilly. There is no, I can't set a rate on it internally with the way the system is built right now. So, and I think we've all dealt with this before when we talk to the salespeople side of things, then the engineer side of things, which becomes two different separate worldviews of how things can happen. Salesmen always say yes, engineers always say no, and it becomes a fight between them. So but that's the reality where we're at. So you guys have to decide. I would think that the most important stuff essentially is where they are, where they're working, and what their specialty is. And outside of that, the rest is nice. But I don't know. And again, I guarantee we will have to chase people down for this. And there is a cost attached to that. And again, I'm agnostic on that particular front, but there is going to be a cost attached to it. And also I wanted to point out one other thing. I want to thank the legislators on the call who gave us the extra money so we could increase the number of nurses by 7,000 that our analysts were able to get through because we were getting out from under a mountain, and they're doing a great job. And I appreciate them giving us a little bit of extra money to get us through some of that hump.
Yeah, can I just say that right now the Georgia Board of Healthcare Workforce does do this for physicians and PAs. They do, and they are charged with that, and they do. Their surveys are not mandatory, and they've hidden the button though, so they think they are. But when they don't, those that figure out that they don't have to fill it out and they don't fill it out, they do. They are charged with actually contacting them, as you said, Gabe, and they do the follow-up. So the Georgia Board, and they're the ones that do our nursing data analysis, not the Board of Nursing, and they do the data analysis for us, and they do the follow-up actually.
If we're tying licensing to it, we got to figure out logistically where does that fit, and I don't know that off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, and I don't know how it works for the dental board because, you know, it is tied to the licensing for the dental board and the dental hygienist. And they've been doing it for several years.
So just to clarify, right now you get your license and then you can respond to this survey at the same time. Yeah, is that how it is currently? So we're looking at now you go to fill out your license, you have to do this survey, but either you have to answer every question, you can't finish your license, get your license, or we in essence make it optional by unlocking everything. Is that correct how I have?
The reality would come out the way you just said, but I think the intent is fill out the important data to make it. I don't want to speak for you, Dr. Eichelberg, but that would be your end game. They have to fill it out, but we have to decide what do we consider substantively complete, and who's doing the chasing to make it substantively complete is an unanswered question at this point.
Okay.
Is that stated properly, I think, Dr. Eichelberger?
Yes, those are the details of it. What we were told by the Attorney General's office is that the board, the way the law was written, is that the the Board of Nursing did not have the legal authority to make it make it mandatory. And so the Board of the Georgia Board of Healthcare hide it. They hide the opt-out button. So there are tricks that you can use to boost it. But we've not done that. We just asked for a ruling from the Attorney General's office about it, and try to get the law changed to grant the board the authority to do it should they wish to do it.
Okay.
And my fiscal note will reflect that they do choose that option, because my fiscal note is going to go to the highest possible point of saying, if we do all of this, here's your Cadillac, kind of thing.
Okay. Well, we are pushing up against time. So again, we need to get this fiscal note done so we can include it in our report. We'll meet again, whatever 2 weeks from now is, the third Wednesday of the month at the same time. And we'll, just to wrap up, I'll do some follow-up on 811 and with DCH and just see kind of generally what we're going to do with that. Council members, please call me on some of these. I would definitely want to get y'all's opinions on this. We can talk through it before we come back in 2 weeks from now. I imagine.
Can I bring up one more thought? And
Sure.
again, y'all might have done this, but incentivizing, and I don't know how many CE credits an RN needs in a year, but could you increase the number of CE credits? And one of those is taking the survey. I'm just trying to get around, another way of incentivizing, because even, goodness, I'm sure this is not appropriate, but paying them to take it would probably be cheaper than going through Gabe. Some kind of gift card even, I don't know. I'm wondering if you thought through some of those incentivizing things, or just a thought.
Yeah. So we'll kind of think on that one for 4:30. It's a good thing. I like it. We lost my train of thought. The census is mandated by the Constitution. There's still not 100% fill out rate for that bad boy. So we'll get that fiscal note. I am confident Gabe will get it to us in plenty of time for the next meeting, because there's nothing else going on, right? And so we are going to be adding another bill to our calendar for next week, and I've been getting a lot of questions about this. We'll start hearing the behavior analysts, House Bill 412. So they'll be their first meeting, and then so we will have another packed calendar for the next. So hopefully, that's what we'll do. So if y'all need anything from me, definitely council members reach out to me if you have any concerns or comments on particularly what we're proposing to consider with House Bill 811, and we'll go from there. So anybody else want to speak before we close the meeting out? Did I miss anybody? All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time and participation in this. I appreciate it. Oh, wait. Representative Earhart has her hand up. I cannot unmute you, though. Okay. Maybe she was an accident. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for your time. All right. Bye.